What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Deku carried the blood of heaven and hell, and his wings finally awakened? If you enjoy then please like, share and do comments. And also check the description to original creator of this beautiful creation. By the age of 4, it became clear to Izuku Myodria that some people simply weren't as strong as others. Some people simply weren't gifted with the same advantages and some people simply weren't born equal. It all dawned on him like an epiphany one night. It was storming outside, and the chaos was simply too much for the neighborhood generator to handle, promptly fizzling and breaking down. Without power, the Midoriya household relied on candles to light up the darkened rooms. It was through this inconvenience, this denial of light and electricity that Izuku shined the brightest. Metaphorically and literally, as the candlelight was soon drawn towards, and then sucked down by the child. The sudden movements caused his stomach to gurgle, and air forced its way out from his throat. Air and fire, that is, the boy burped fire. Needless to say, tiny Izuku was ecstatic to finally awaken his quirk. Even from a young age, he had a hobby, dare say obsession with quirks. And even at 4, his mind was whirling at the implications of his newfound power. The following day, he was quick to demonstrate his quirk. He asked his teachers for a small fire, to which they hesitantly agreed. And much like the night before, Izuku opened his mouth, and all but slurped down the gentle small flame. The teachers clapped, and his fellow students all stared in awe. They were all but certain he was quirkless. He was the last one to manifest a quirk in his class after all. Izuku flushed in embarrassment at the sudden praise and attention, but ultimately decided to continue with his demonstration. Izuku's cheeks were puffed. He tilted his head upwards and unleashed a small fountain-like stream of fire. It lingered in the air, only a foot or two from his mouth before dissipating entirely. If the awe and praise was obligatory before, then now, it was definitely present with genuine awe and expectation. "Wow, Midoriya, your quirk is very amazing," his male teacher exclaimed, clapping his hands and beaming proudly towards the boy. "It sure is," his female teacher agreed. The students all but cheered at the phenomenon before them. Izuku was a walking flamethrower. The genuine praise made Izuku beam in joy. They thought his quirk was cool too. They thought it was amazing, just like Kachan's. Surely then, he could become a hero, just like his idol, All Might. Speaking of Kachan, he turned to see his friend's reaction. The green-haired boy flinched at the deepening scowl on his friend's face. His sharp eyes were narrowed, his red eyes glaring at Izuku. Despite that all, Kachan remained quiet, favoring to simply glare at his friend. The rest of the day passed, with people going up to Izuku and asking him about his quirk. The timid boy would dissolve into a babbling mess every time. But instead of scorn, the majority of his classmates found it annoying at worst. It didn't deter them from continuously seeking him out. Lunch arrived, and Izuku was looking forward to speaking with Kachan. Perhaps now the name Deku would lose all of its meaning. After all, with a quirk like his, surely, he couldn't be useless, right? Izuku practically ran over to his friend and was skipping before him in endless energy. The blonde's scowl deepened at his sight. "What is it, Deku?" the little boy said through gritted teeth. "D Deku? B but I have a quirk N. Who cares? You're still Deku, you're still useless," Kachan interrupted, crossing his arms and sulking deeper into his chair. Katsuki was not pleased. Not pleased at all to hear the students and teachers praise Deku, Deku of all people. Deku was a weak crybaby. It angered him to think that Deku of all people was now his equal. It pained Katsuki to admit Deku had a pretty cool quirk too. It pained him greatly. It felt threatening. It felt dangerous. Even at his young age, he knew when a potential challenge to his climb as the #1 hero was presented before him. It just infuriated him beyond belief that his first stepping stone was his cowardly friend of all people. He knew he was amazing, the best, the greatest. His teachers told him as such. But to tell Deku the same too? That stung. It carved deeply into his growing ego. It angered him. He was supposed to be amazing, no one else. His teachers said he was amazing. It's not fair that someone else can be amazing too. It's his title, he earned it. Yet, here he was, sharing the title with someone. It was like having candy ripped from his hands. He had a lot of anger swirling through him. He definitely didn't want to talk to his friend now of all times. Yet naturally, the green-haired dummy just had to immediately waltz up to him during lunch. "You useless," Deku repeated, his eyes were watering at the thought. That just served to anger Katsuki more. This was his supposed equal? A crybaby who can't even stand up to him. "Yes, useless. Your quirk sucks. You need someone's help to make it work," Katsuki shouted. His hostile tone and outburst was snuffed out in the cacophonous classroom, but Izuku heard it loud and clear from his position beside the blonde. It stung hearing that from his friend. He just wanted his approval, and admittedly to get rid of that mean nickname. But to think Kacchan already discovered his quirk's weakness from one demonstration alone. His friend was really amazing. It was due to Kacchan's inherent talent that Izuku wanted his approval. To be accepted by Kacchan would have been the second best thing to happen from receiving his quirk. The quirk itself topping any experience. Yet now, he couldn't help but agree with his blonde friend. His quirk needed a fire source to work. Izuku learned that much from his experimenting. His mom was pretty nervous with her son playing with fire, but indulged it, admittedly with many precautions in place. Through that experimentation, Izuku noticed that he couldn't generate fire on his own. He needed another source to successfully use his quirk. Izuku wasn't particularly bummed out by the prospect, too engrossed and thrilled to simply have a quirk at all. However, with the excitement fading, and his weakness being so openly chastised by his friend, he was starting to see the merit in the criticism. His quirk, objectively lacked practicality. Unless he carried fire with him at all timers, it would be situational. Izuku in time would learn how to properly and eloquently pinpoint the weaknesses and benefits of his quirk. But at his young age, all he could surmise was that his quirk was useless without help. By extension, what's to say he wasn't the same? Preschool ended and his mother picked him up. He was quiet during the whole time back, his energetic and jovial mood sapped away from his friend's scalding words. Inko Midoriya took notice of her son's change instantaneously. It was a glaring contrast to the thrilled excitement he shown not only a few hours ago. She asked what happened and only managed to receive a mumbled response of, "Nothing." Clearly, it wasn't nothing, but she really didn't wish to pry. She decided on a different approach altogether. After supper was cooked, ate and cleared up, Inko made her way towards the house's computer and fired up the only video her son's been viewing for the last few months now. All Might's debut video. She cranked up the speakers and pressed play. Inko would claim it took courage to view such a bleak and disastrous-looking video. However, she would never let her child view something without seeing it first. As such, she understood, if only slightly, where her child comes from when watching it. The hulking man with the never-fading smile would emerge from a desolate highway with heaps of people draped across his arms. His booming laughter pierced through the chaos. His smile, calming and resonating. And his words of reassurance and encouragement even made her feel at ease from the comforts of her own home. Izuku barreled through the door, flushed cheeks and a beaming toothy smile. He dashed towards the chair, launched onto it and glued his gaze towards the screen in practiced ease. Inko stifled a giggle, her child was far too easy. His sudden burst of joy and energy quickly subsided, and a somber expression washed over his features. It puzzled Inko. Perhaps he wasn't as easy to read as she thought? What had her child feeling so distraught, even after learning about his quirk? She wouldn't deny the amount of relief she felt once she saw her little Izuku awaken his quirk. She even had an appointment set for the following week. Her baby boy was the only child in his class who still hadn't manifested his quirk. She was feeling nervous and anxious, dreading him being quirkless. Her fears washed away once he started to breathe fire though, a quirk inherited mostly from his father. Regardless, with her fears quenched and secured, she'd imagine Izuku too would feel excited and happy to finally have his quirk. So why the long face? Her answer came quicker than she imagined as the boy turned on the swivel chair and faced his mother. His eyes were puffy, and he was chewing on his lower lip in a feeble attempt against tearing up. Pools formed near the bottom of his eyes as his lips started to quiver. "Mom, can I be a hero?" the boy asked, although it was arguably a begged plea. Inko was caught off guard, not from the question, but the state of her child. He was crying. He was in pain. Someone or something had made him question his resolve. It sent ripples of turmoil through her person. She fell to her knees and clamped her arms around her crying boy, pressing her cheek against his. "Of course, Izu, of course you can," she whispered sweetly. It made her heart wrench to hear him choke at her words. He proceeded to cry his heart out, babbling incoherently at her. Inko couldn't resist but reciprocating his actions. The two remained in each other's embrace for minutes, simply indulging in each other's cathartic experience. It had been months since Izuku awoke his quirk. In those months he decided he needed change in order to improve his chances of becoming a hero. Although his mom didn't let him use the internet, he did have access to books. Their trips to the library were becoming some of his personal favorites. This in itself helped surge his ability to read and write tremendously. Especially due to the content material he had in mind. It was difficult, and he'd admittedly get his mom to do most of the reading. But Izuku was tenacious and determined if nothing else. Beyond that, Izuku also focused on his interpersonal relationships. He decided against associating with Kacchan. It was a hard choice for him, after all, he admired his friend greatly. But his mom believed he could be a hero and he wouldn't allow for anyone to undermine her words. He wasn't going to let her faith in him break or waver. By doing so, he'd have to prevent his own motivation and will from doing the same. Kacchan at first was furious, even going out of his way to antagonize Izuku. Although the words stung, and he felt like he wanted to cry. He refused to respond. Eventually, the blonde gave up, always a massive scowl on his face. Izuku always wondered why his friend became the way he did. But after his quirk manifested, he was starting to relate far more than he was comfortable with. He had friends, now, who stuck to him like glue. His teachers always made sure to praise him in equal amounts they did Kacchan. It was very embarrassing. Izuku lost count of the times his brain fried from all of the attention and general kindness. He'd normally wish to disappear or avoid so much interaction altogether. However, the aspiring hero took this as an opportunity to practice. The media and citizens played a big role in hero life. Usually they were a bit overbearing too. Being admired for his quirk could just be seen as being admired for his heroics. At the very least, the idea was there so that he wouldn't dissolve into a blushing mess every time someone had something nice to say. It was a work in progress, but even Izuku was starting to see some results. Inko Midoriya showed great interest in helping her son's dream become a reality. As such, over the months she did plenty of research into heroism and quirk theory. Naturally, she found the latter of the two more difficult to comprehend. However, the path to becoming a hero became quite clear to her. In fact, the greatest chance for him to become a hero was actually in the very city they lived in. Ua High School was situated in Musutafu City. It had grueling entrance exam rates, but those were 10 years away. 10 years enough for her child to hone his skills and be ready. She was certain of this especially due to seeing the determination on Izuku's face. He still got distracted by All Might videos and the occasional candy or ice cream, but he had a strong resolve and it showed. Inko decided that the best way to help Izuku's chances were to first get him some help with his quirk. As amazing as fire breathing was, it was highly dangerous. Its growth would be stunted in the confinements of their house. A tutor or an expert in the field could help him train it safely. It would cost some cash, but ultimately was a necessary investment. She sprung the idea onto Izuku over dinner and the boy practically squealed at the prospect, nodding his head with such fervor she worried he'd get whiplash. Inko has never seen her boy eat so quickly and actively go to bed. He was basically willing the next day to come. Izuku was beside his mom with his hand held. They two greenettes had their eyes glued to the building before them. It was slick in design, new with metallic colors. Izuku only knew that the building here was supposed to help him learn how to use his quirk more effectively. Or, to make it not as useless. Izuku was thrilled by the prospect. Sure, meeting new people and going to new places made him a bit nervous, but with his mom by his side, and the promise of improvement easily surpassed those nerves. After some more psyching up, Izuku and his mother marched into the building. The air conditioning splashed over them as they entered. The metallic exterior matched the interior, and the place looked more like a laboratory than it did a quirk expert office. Inko Midoriya didn't allow that to deter her though. She pressed forward, with her child staring in awe. The aspiring hero never thought he'd find himself in a quirk facility. That just felt like the things real heroes used. The pair walked up towards the receptionist desk. Seated there was a woman in a neat suit and hair that looked like water. Her gaze rose from her monitor towards the two greenettes. "May I help you?" She asked curt and politely. I've set an appointment with Mizuha Atsunori for Midoriya Izuku. Inko responded mechanically, getting caught up in the moment. The woman's looked from the woman towards the small boy. Izuku was hugging his mom's pant leg, using it as cover. He peered from behind the safety and comfort that she was. I see, you are a bit early, are you okay to wait? The woman asked. Izuku's mom only managed to open her mouth before someone started to speak. That won't be necessary. The little boy jumped at the sound and angled himself in a position where his mom can act as cover for both the receptionist and the grizzled-looking old man. You must be Mrs. Midoriya, pleasure to meet you, the man said in between a bow. Mizuha, Inko reciprocated the gesture in return. He was older, wrinkles on his face and his dark brown hair was riddled with silver roots. His blue eyes fell onto the timid boy and crinkled kindly. He crouched down until he was at eye level with Izuku. You must be little Izuku. I heard you have a very cool quirk, the man greeted warmly, a smile on his face. Izuku beamed at his remark, pumping his tiny chest out in pride. The elder boomed out in laughter and patted the child on his messy green locks. I'll help you learn how to use your quirk, but I'll need you to pay attention, can you do that? The man asked. The aspiring hero nodded vehemently, his little fists clenching in a sign of gusto and eagerness. The elder laughed out loud a second time before rising up to his full stature again. I like him. I look forward to working alongside the two of you. Izuku's first day of middle school had him a bit anxious. No matter how much confidence he managed to gain, something about exploring the unknown always seemed to put him on edge. It was like that for elementary school, and when he joined recreational soccer. It realistically shouldn't even bother him that much. The majority of his elementary friends were going to the same middle school as him. He used the term friend loosely, as most only truly saw him for his academic intellect and quirk. Admittedly, Izuku never really took much time to develop his friendships further than that. He was a very busy boy, and if he wanted to become a hero, he needed to devote himself 100%. Every weekend he would head out towards Mizuha's office to practice and develop his quirk. Once he was old enough to understand, his teacher would explain to him that a quirk could be seen as a physical extension of one's body, and as such required use to grow. Kind of like muscles. Izuku took those words to heart and would actively try to use his quirk whenever he could. Usually in the confinements of his home or in isolation. Quirk use without a license could be seen as a minor crime after all. And that's something the Greenet would like to avoid altogether. Izuku also decided to adhere to a rigorous training schedule. Something he started recently at the request of his quirk instructor. A hero can't solely rely on their quirk, no matter how cool it is. Right, that makes sense. It'd make us susceptible to jarring weaknesses and villains could exploit that quite easily. The best course of action then is to diversify our talents and increase utility. By doing so, then we can at least make ourselves more of a THR. Yes, exactly what you said. As such, I want you to create a workout plan. The older man interrupted with a cheerful smile. A workout plan? Correct. Don't misunderstand, you're a fit boy Izuku, but if you want to be a hero, you need to be at the pinnacle of your physical capabilities. Okay, I'll do it, he responded, his demeanor visibly glowing at the sound of hero. Izuku went to the library and read up on proper ways to better improve one's body. Admittedly, the majority of what he found was just magazines and fads. But he persisted regardless. Eventually, he decided on quitting recreational sports and instead joined a gym. Money was tight, especially with the payments his mom pitched in for his quirk development. As such, he realistically could only afford to do one or the other. Concentrating his efforts would simply warrant the best results. But beyond going to the gym, Izuku also made sure to go out for runs too. He juggled each and every muscle he worked, maximizing his efficiency. He would wonder sometimes as to why he didn't start earlier. However, every time he would vaguely recall how premature muscle building could have negative effects. He'd usually leave the topic at that. Back at the topic at hand, Izuku was standing before his middle school. It was 3 floors tall, probably per year, had a brick gate, cream-white walls, and trees lining the entrance. It was imposing compared to his small elementary school. That was for certain. Aldera Junior High. Izuku gulped down his nerves and took his first step forward, only to clip the back of his shin and lean forward. This is going to hurt, he thought absently, his eyes glued to the quickly closing pavement. Before he could embrace the cool hard surface, he was snapped back upright with severe force. He was on his own 2 feet again, which prompted a small sigh of relief. Izuku froze, his eyes landing onto his savior. Deku, what the hell do you think you're doing? Katsuki hissed, his eyes narrowing dangerously. Bakugo. Nothing. I mean, I was falling, but duh. Fucking Christ, shut up if you're just going to stutter, the blonde responded, shoving his hands into his pockets and walking past the greenette. Thank you, Izuku finally said. Whatever. Katsuki stopped, and turned to face his former friend. You're not my equal. You'll never be my equal, got that? He snarled. The blonde didn't wait for a response and turned away from him. It occurred to Izuku that a bit of a crowd was forming around them. He supposed their reputation preceded them. Bakugo, Izuku called. The boy in question stiffened, angling his head to the side. Visibly, one eye poked out from his blonde spiky locks to glare at Izuku, as if piercing right through him. It made the aspiring hero pause, and gulp in anxiety. He couldn't let what happened in the past deter him from saying something he wanted to say for a long time. He shook his head and steeled his resolve. Izuku returned the glare with a gaze of his own, one that he hoped portrayed his conviction. I don't want to be your equal, I intend to surpass you, the greenette proclaimed. Murmurs instantly followed from the forming audience. Not that Izuku paid it too much mind, instead, his unflinching gaze remained on the blonde. Bakugo turned his body to fully face him. His red eyes narrowed viciously and a feral smile slowly started to spread across his face. I'll fucking kill you, Bakugo replied calmly, his wicked smile never faltering. Despite his tone or the vulgarity of his remark, Katsuki Bakugo couldn't have been more thrilled. Deku finally grew a spine. Perhaps he wouldn't be such a useless stepping stone after all. His feral smile grew wider at the prospect. Deku, who was placed on the same pedestal as him, was finally showing something worthwhile. Izuku stood a few meters away from the regulated campfire. He turned to face his teacher, who simply nodded in return. The aspiring hero took that as an invitation and opened his mouth wide. The flames quickly reacted, and were whipped from their position and traveled through the air in a thin stream. The fire poured into Izuku's mouth until the entirety of it all was gone, causing the boy to swallow with a sigh. The irises of his eyes started to glow a faint red. According to Sensei Mizuha, it meant he was reaching his maximum capacity. 3 discuses shot from the wall, soaring in separate arches and velocities. The greenette lowered his stance, bending his knees slightly as he inhaled a deep breath. He quickly blew towards the targets, flames shooting from his mouth in a concentrated beam of fire. Izuku jerked his head with precision, tracing the target's trajectory. His mouth curled into a smile as he watched with satisfaction as the targets erupt into shattered pieces. The ignited fragments crashed to the ground. The aspiring hero wiped his forehead with his sleeve, and bent over in exhaustion. It was tiring to breathe so much fire in succession like that. Good, very good, Izuku, Mizuha exclaimed, clapping his hands. Thank you, sensei, the greenette said sheepishly, rubbing the back of his head. Izuku has worked under Atsunori Mizuha for the last several years, using his facility to cultivate his quirk, as well as take suggestions on ways to improve it. Over the years, Izuku has managed to gain an affinity with controlling the projection of his flames, a mastery that would have been near impossible without the proper supervision. Additionally, the aspiring hero has expanded his range, both in his fire breathing, as well as fire consumption as Izuku coined it. At his uppermost limit, Izuku could absorb flames from as far as 30 meters away. Considerable improvement from his initial 3 feet. Although Izuku couldn't control his flames after breathing them out, Mizuha was adamant on claiming that with enough practice, Izuku would be able to do so. Moreover, his teacher also believed that with enough experimenting and precision training, Izuku could possibly learn to consume more than just fire. Perhaps heat, even light. All of these prospects made the aspiring hero more determined than ever. His quirk may have a glaring weakness, but if he could expand his fuel, then he'd undoubtedly become more versatile. Izuku, this will be our final lesson, Mizuha said after some time. The boy in question snapped his head so violently, he nearly gave himself whiplash. SSS sensei? Why, did I do something wrong? Ha, Nothing like that, boy. Simply put, there's very little I can do for you now. Izuku tilted his head in confusion, his mind meticulously working through the meaning behind those words. Was he trying to tell him that there's nothing to be taught? That after all of these years, they're done? But he still needed to use the facility. There weren't any other places that could allow him to use his dangerous quirk otherwise. Don't fret, Izuku. You're free to use the facility when you wish. People will supervise you too. I, however, cannot offer you any more assistance. I leave the experimentation and advanced development to my most adept pupils, Mizuha explained, a knowing smile on his face. The boy shrunk in on himself. He was thinking out loud again, wasn't he? Nevertheless, Izuku believed he understood where his Tiak former teacher was coming from. Izuku had a relatively decent mastery over his quirk's core fundamentals. All that was left was to customize it, specialize his quirk to cater towards his own personal needs. Izuku, you have your eyes set for Ua, correct? Mizuha asked. He folded his arms across his chest as he awaited an answer. Blinking, the boy nodded his head fervorously, more than anything. Very well, by the start of your final year in middle school, set an appointment with me, show me the progress you've had since today. If you impress me, I'll forward a recommendation to Ua, Mizuha explained. Izuku's mouth hung open, his eyes wide in unabashed shock. A recommendation? To Ua. His mother and him did some research on Ua, and they surmised that admission into the heroics department was immensely difficult. But beyond that, every year, a select few students would be accepted via recommendation. Recommendations basically meant that the student was the best of the best. They took a specialized test, one even more daunting than the standardized entrance exam. To make up for the increase in difficulty, recommendations essentially reduced the costs of attending to zero, as well as gaining immense publicity. It practically jump-starts one's harrowing career before it even started. Izuku had to prevent himself from drooling, and focused his eyes onto his former teacher. Only heroes could recommend a potential student into UA. Realization dawned on the boy, as he started starry-eyed up to Mizuha. Why, you're a hero. Haha, was a hero. I retired a while back. I still run this office though, the man corrected, pointing his open palms outwards, referring to the facility. Holy crap, that's incredible. What was your hero name? What was your quirk? I can't believe I've been working under the tutelage of a pro hero, retired or otherwise, and being none the wiser. I hope he haven't managed to offend you in any way, and may I please have an autograph? Wow, take it easy there. Name was Typhoon. My quirk, Water Soaker, allows me to manipulate moisture in the air, and if you want the signature of a wizened old man like myself, then sure, the older man said, keeping up with his pupil's stammering. Izuku nodded vigorously, which prompted the older man to laugh. He patted the greenette on the head. You're a good kid, with a kind heart. You'll make a splendid hero. Mizuha paused, and watched fondly as the boy beamed at his remark. That being said, I won't just give out recommendations just because I like you. You still need to earn it. Izuku's eyes hardened, his goofy smile was replaced with a thin line. Mizuha was always amazed at how seriously the boy took his heroics. His determination to become a hero was persistent beyond belief, it was practically an obsession. Mizuha recalled asking what caused his fixation, what motivated him. The response he received was perhaps the last confirmation he needed. Why do you want to become a hero, Izuku Midoriya? Money? Fame? No, nothing like that. Izuku paused in his exercise, giving the question some serious thought. I guess I'm becoming a hero because I was told I can. Expectation and obligation then? I guess that came out wrong. Ever since I was little I wanted to become a hero. I got this amazing quirk, and I was given the support and encouragement to fulfill my dream. I won't let this opportunity go to waste. Yes, that's all well and good, but you haven't answered why you want to become a hero? I guess it's because I look up to All Might. He helps people with a smile, acts as their beacon of hope. I want to do that too. I want to help people with a smile, Izuku responded, smiling sheepishly. Nothing in Mizuha's mind would have convinced him otherwise. Izuku Midoriya has what it takes to become the greatest hero to brace the world. Such inherent altruism was rare to see in this superhuman community. Such tenacity, intellect, drive and resolve created a perfect collage of necessary attributes required in a hero. Atsunori Mizuha was just grateful to be a part of the boy's story. He couldn't wait to see the kind of ripples Izuku would have. After only a few months of middle school, it was becoming quite apparent to Izuku that classes were going to be pretty easy for him. The majority of the topics have been things he already taught himself. All of those countless trips into the library truly paid off. His ability to read and write had already reached the level of high school students. His habit for learning things quickly and meticulous nature also made him beyond suited for mathematics and science classes. In all actuality, after the initial nervousness of going to school, Izuku was struck with perpetual boredom. His middle school life was rather stale. The only real problem he had was mostly in regards to socialization. He wasn't particularly talkative, yet despite that, he couldn't even pin his blatant lack of friends on his timid nature. In fact, if he were to blame anything, it'd have to be external influences. Also known as Bakugo Katsuki. For whatever reason, ever since their encounter at the school gate, Bakugo has been spending a lot of time around Izuku. At first it startled him. His friend, then turned bully, if only for a marginal amount of time, had still left him a bit jumpy. But as the weeks passed, and Bakugo's worst offenses really only extending to his vocabulary, Izuku was safe to conclude that the blonde's intentions weren't what they used to be. If anything, he was rather amicable with him, in the loosest term of the definition. However, this prickly amiability only extended to Izuku. Anyone else who tried to talk to the duo would be quickly and violently told off. It left Izuku rather exasperated. His chances at making friends, slowly seeping away, one curse word at a time. Not that the Greenette would ever voice said opinion. Bakugo's company was rather encouraging. He was one of the few, if only other student Izuku knew who was serious about becoming a hero. Not to mention, he was smart enough to help Izuku with any academic problems, even if it was very seldom occurring. Izuku was snapped from his trance as a minor explosion blew up in front of his face. He jumped in his chair, his eyes whirling at the sudden sound and light. Once they refocused, he saw Bakugo's flexed hand before him. "Deku, quit dozing off, class ended already," the blonde grunted, slinging his bag over his shoulder. "All right," the teen followed suit, ignoring the stares and murmurs coming from his classmates. The two walked down the hallways, down the stairs and towards their own separate lockers. In that time, Izuku's mind was in overdrive. Just like every other time the two would head to their lockers. His mind would be running at 100 miles an hour. Why? Why was he being nice again? Why was he even talking to him? No, associating with him. From an objective perspective, they look like friends, if you squint. So it didn't make any sense. Izuku swore he'd stop associating with Kak Bakugo because he was a bad influence, a negative one. Yet, as things stood, Bakugo was anything but. He was a good foil, a good comparison for him to see how much further he needed to go. "Deku, I said to quit dozing off," Bakugo shouted, slamming his open palm against the Greenette's locker. The impact triggered a minor explosion, jolting Izuku away from his internal thoughts. The abrupt noise caused the Greenette to fall onto his bottom. "Ow, that was uncal." The Greenette paused, seeing the scowl present on his not-friend's face. "Get up," he whispered, his voice icily cool. "What? I said get up. Why are you acting like a goddamn weakling?" Bakugo shouted, his hands subconsciously hissing as his sweat started to ignite. "All right, sorry. Don't fucking apologize." "Okay, I won't," Izuku replied quickly, holding his hands up in defeat. Bakugo's scowl deepened. He didn't say anything, instead favored yanking the Greenette by one of his arms back up onto his feet. Izuku noticed a distinct change in the blonde's demeanor. Something was different about him. "Deku, come with me," Bakugo hissed. He didn't wait for a response, instead turned, shoved his hands in his pocket and marched out the doors. Izuku was left at the lockers with a sheepish look on his face. He quickly apologized to everyone for the commotion and dashed after his sort of friend. Izuku caught up to the blonde with relative ease. He matched his pace, much like he did every other time the two walked home. Whether it was fortunate or not that they lived so close to each other was something Izuku would be willing to debate. Regardless, in this instance, he knew they weren't going directly home. The deviation was clear. It seemed Bakugo had something in mind for them. It made him a bit anxious. It was odd. Bakugo didn't really bully him for long, maybe a month or two back in preschool. The last instance was when Izuku stood up for a child, one who was at the brute end of Bakugo and his friends tormenting. The Greenette recalled fighting the three. He used Bakugo's quirk as fuel and valiantly held them off. He gave the stranger plenty of time to flee. Bakugo realized he was fueling Izuku's quirk with his own but was so enraged by the sheer audacity he didn't stop. Eventually though, Izuku did end up losing the battle. They only hit him for a bit before ditching him on the ground. Ever since that incident, Bakugo stopped trying to bully him. Heck, he stopped associating with Izuku altogether. At least, he did until the first day of middle school. But like previously mentioned, the way Bakugo has started to interact with the Greenette had left him in utter confusion. "I swear to God, if you don't get your head out of your ass, I'll fucking kill you." Bakugo seethed, his eyes narrowing dangerously and fingers twitching. "Sore, I mean." "Okay," Izuku stammered, correcting himself mid-sentence. "We're here," Bakugo supplied, dropping his bag by his side. Izuku tilted his head in confusion. What did he mean by that? He scanned his surroundings, first noticing the slide and jungle gym set. To his side, a lone tree and bench. Recognition quickly dawned on him. It helped that he was just thinking of this location too. "I remember here," Izuku said in forced calmness. "Drop the bag, Deku, get ready," Bakugo said, his hair shadowing his eyes. The boy in question paled. He had his suspicions the moment Bakugo dragged him here of all places. But to fight? Did he want to see who was stronger? Was that it? Whatever the case, Izuku complied with the request, carefully placing his All Might theme bag safely on top of the bench. The two teens walked to the center, then both fell into combative stances. Silence befell the both of them. They remained on high alert but refrained from actually committing to any actions. Izuku was mentally reeling. He said he wanted to surpass Bakugo, he just didn't figure Bakugo would take him seriously. He never did before, and if the nickname, Deku, was anything to go by, he still didn't take him seriously now. Why fight? Izuku simply didn't understand what was going through Bakugo's mind. He figured it may be better that way. But in the middle of the neighborhood, at the park no less? Izuku was worried they'd draw attention, or worst, get in trouble. "Are you sure we should be doing this here?" Izuku asked, although his guard never faltered. Izuku would like to think he was rather perceptive, so it didn't go unnoticed by him when the blonde stiffened, his muscles tensed, nose twitched, brows narrowed and fingers flexed. In fact, given how high alert he felt, his instincts were practically screaming at him to move. "Shut up, I'm settling this," Bakugo growled. The next instant, the blonde lunged, using his explosions to propel him forward at a blistering pace. He winded up his right arm and swung viciously towards the Greenette. Izuku, resigned to fighting his probably not a friend, quickly predicted the telegraphed attack and ducked underneath it. The Greenette opened his mouth, and absorbed the lingering flames from Bakugo's initial explosion. Then, he spun on his heels, turning to face the airborne blonde and unleashed a torrent of flames. The fiery attack didn't reach its target, an explosion disrupted the flow of the flames, and another sent the blonde shooting upwards. If Izuku wasn't currently sparring with him, he'd be vastly impressed with Bakugo's aerial mastery. Instead, the aspiring hero was more focused with diving out of the way of another bomb-like attack. He just narrowly dodged it, with heat rushing against his body in doing so. Izuku's attention was quickly diverted to the sudden shadow splashing over him, his eyes darting to the source. Bakugo was in the air, his explosions propelling him towards his downed opponent, his right hand hissed and glowed. Izuku fired a shot in response. Bakugo squinted his eyes and tilted his head to the side, weaving out of the attack's way. He brought his fist down and ignited it on contact, uprooting dirt as a result. Dirt? Izuku's distraction gave him just enough time to roll out of direct impact, but the force sent him tumbling more than he intended. He got to his feet and absently started dusting himself off. "Take this serious, nerd," Bakugo vehemently shouted, and was once again launching towards Izuku. "I am," came the equally vehement response. Izuku sidestepped the swinging blow and latched onto his opponent's arm. Bakugo tensed as he felt another arm hook under his armpit. He felt Izuku pivot on his heels, and suddenly, the world turned upside down. The blonde bounced painfully against the ground, wincing at the sudden impact as spittle was forcefully released from his mouth. Bakugo felt as if his head was spinning but still managed to fire off a retaliatory explosion. Izuku, unready for the fast recovery, dove back into a roll, creating distance. This gave the blonde enough time to reorientate and launch himself onto his feet. He became mildly aware of the residue flames being dragged through the air into an open mouth. He also became aware of Izuku's green eyes. They started to glow with a dull red outline. He felt tense. Izuku's next attack would be stronger. He had an instinctual feeling of that. He'd have to up his ante if he wanted to deal with whatever the green idiot threw at him. No more punches, he was getting read too easily. Instead, he'd just overwhelm him with explosions from close range. With his plan made, Bakugo grinned viciously as he launched himself towards Izuku one more time. Instead of winding up for a punch, he brought both his hands back, smoke drifting from open palms. Izuku felt fatigued. All the constant jumping and dodging in such a short span had him panting, his clothing stuck uncomfortably to his body. He saw the attack coming, but his reactions lagged and his legs protested against avoiding it. He'd have to exchange blows. He bent his knees and raised his arms up in a guard, parting them slightly in front of his face as to not block his path. He opened his mouth, willing his flames to bottleneck at the surface. Die! Bakugo shouted, bringing both his sizzling hands forward in anticipation. From point-blank range, neither of them could dodge the other's attack. They received the full brunt of their quirks. Bakugo felt his uniform singe and his body burn, whilst the force behind the blow sent Izuku flailing backwards, crashing into the slide set. There was a pregnant pause, the sound of groans emanating from the playground. After a few seconds, Izuku begrudgingly got to his feet. He winced when his hand brushed against his side. He was certain that it would bruise. He then remembered as to why it would, and snapped his attention from his side back towards his opponent. Bakugo was gritting his teeth, and a vicious snarl was plastered on his face. He looked worse for wear, with grim and sweat sticking to his forehead. His uniform appeared unsalvageable, with singe marks and burns riddling it all over. But easily, the most important feature was the fact that Bakugo was on one knee. Red eyes connected with green. Izuku noticed the minuscule change. He noticed how the blonde's eyes widened slightly before narrowing again. Painfully, Bakugo got to his feet, and bit down on his tongue to regain some focus. We're not done here, duh. Fweet. The two teens snapped their heads to the sound, focusing first on the source. Across from them, on the other side of their impromptu arena, was a thoroughly unimpressed officer. He had a whistle sticking from his mouth, and a deadpan expression on his face. You two have some explaining to do, the man said as he marched over towards the teens. I'm so sorry for everything my idiot son did, officer. Bakugo Mitsuki apologized, bowing from her seated position. Shut up, Ha. The Bakugo matriarch smacked up her son, promptly silencing him. The officer involuntarily gulped before clearing his throat. Well, given how this is Bakugo Katsuki's first offense, I suppose we could let him off with a warning, but he should strive to better himself. He has an amazing quirk. The officer paused, and faced the scowling teen. You wish to become a hero, yes? No shush. Smack. Yes, I want to become a hero, the teen corrected, glaring towards his mother. She had an innocent smile on her face, which only further infuriated him. Smarten up then, you and your friend have incredible quirks, but using them for combat, no matter how safe you try to be, is wrong. Do I make myself clear? The officer waited for a response. Once it became apparent that he wasn't going to receive one, he raised a brow disapprovingly. The blonde refused to meet his gaze, instead his mouth started to form a thin frown. Smack. Could you fuck? Smack. Yes? Crystal, are we done here? The officer paled. Should he write her up instead? No, he thought against it, lest he attracted her ire. He coughed into his fist before nodding. Ahem, yes. That's all, you two may leave. Bakugo didn't need a second invitation. He got up from his chair and all too hastily made his way to the door. The police station he found himself in was small, and relatively quiet given the time of day. However, that's as far as Katsuki's interest went. Truth be told, he was more fixated on the fight. He lost. He could have denied it, he knew he could have continued to fight, he was a bit battered, but was more than capable of continuing. However, it was clear that in their last attack, when both hits collided point blank, he got up last. Deku managed to shoulder everything Bakugo threw at him. He even managed to dish it back. Katsuki would never openly admit fighting Deku would be a bad matchup for him. But even he couldn't deny that his quirk would only fuel and power Deku's. Not to mention the area they chose to fight in, Constricted space crowded with needless obstacles and with plenty of flammables was a severe handicap for his wide-affecting explosions. The blonde paused in his step and shook his head. It wouldn't matter, the kind of handicap would extend to the fire-breathing idiot too. No matter how he wished to twist and turn it, Bakugo lost. The defeat grated at his ego. But at the same time, he couldn't help but feel oddly relieved. Deku was seen as his equal by society for years. Bakugo may have stopped associating with him, but that didn't stop the constant reminder and praise always being delivered in pair. It agitated him for nearly the entirety of elementary school. Constant reminder of his equal. Despite that, he always refused to believe it. Actions always spoke louder than words, and what he saw, whenever he had half a mind to care, always left plenty to be desired. However, seeing Deku on their first day of middle school, something simply drew in the blonde. His stance was different, his posture straightened, he carried more confidence. He carried the kind of confidence Bakugo would expect demand from his perceived equal. However, what Bakugo did at the front gate was nothing more than an impulse, a whim even he couldn't explain. Eventually he got fed up with Deku's timid personality. The idiot was embarrassing him. The blonde started to question himself. Was Deku really worthy? Seeing his societal equal act in such an pathetic state frustrated him. Bakugo simply had to see where the greenette stood in comparison to him. Deku was seen as his equal by society for years. Now, Bakugo was starting to see why. Izuku shrunk deeper and deeper into the couch. He couldn't really meet his mother's gaze, especially her look of betrayal. It was surprisingly effective in making him feel incredibly guilty. His mother sighed, then gently rubbed the top of his head. "I'm going to start dinner." His mom paused. It prompted Izuku to meet her eyes. She looked blatantly disappointed, but there was something else, he couldn't quite make it out. Whatever it was, it made his mother hesitant. It was clear that she wanted to add something more, but decided against it. With nothing else to say, she made her way towards the kitchen. Izuku slumped even deeper into the couch, slapping his head with an open palm. He knew fighting Bakugo was a stupid idea. His whole career as a hero could have ended before it even started. Heck, he was only off the hook because he had a strong hero quirk. Izuku swore he wouldn't fight Bakugo again, no matter what. That being said, he wouldn't deny how incredibly liberating it felt. He managed to hold his own against Bakugo. His childhood friend, turned bully, turned stranger. Although he didn't verbally receive respect and approval from the blonde, he couldn't deny that in combat, he felt the closest to being Bakugo's equal in a long time. If their fight was the last time the two interacted with each other, then Izuku could say with confidence that he didn't hold any regrets. Ding dong. "Izuku, can you get the door?" his mother called. She was back in her usual mood, but Izuku knew it was forced cheer. With a sigh, the greenette hopped up from his resting place and walked towards the entrance. "Hello, this is the Mido." He lost the rest of his voice as a familiar blonde was standing on the other side of the now open doorway. "Deku," the teen growled, shoving his hands into his pockets. "Bakugo." The two refrained from saying anything else and avoided eye contact. The silence stretched long enough to reach the realm of awkward. It prompted Izuku into rubbing his arm. He smiled nervously towards the blonde who in turn scowled. "Izuku, who's at the is that little Kacchan? You've grown up so much." Inko said, drying her hands on a towel. "Why yep. It's Kacchan, hee," Izuku said, laughing nervously to help ease his rising tension. Oddly enough, he noticed Bakugo relax ever so slightly, his shoulders dropping an inch. Both their attention was drawn towards the Midoriya matriarch. "That's very convenient. Perhaps you both can explain as to why you were fighting this afternoon?" the woman asked, her smile taking up a feigned innocence. Izuku paled, his eyes shifted towards the blonde, who remained impassive at the line of questioning. His crimson eyes betrayed nothing, his clenched jaw on the other hand, did. After some time, the blonde lowered his gaze and sighed tiredly. "My old hag of a mother wanted me to come here and—" He paused, clenching his jaw again. Izuku suspected he was biting his tongue, lest the blonde say something to cause needless problems. The greenette tilted his head in confusion. What exactly did Mrs. Bakugo want her son here for? The fight came to mind initially, but Izuku agreed to it. He wasn't any less responsible than Kacchan was. "Deku, Baku, listen, Quit using my family name, the blonde corrected, recalling he was still in the presence of Mrs. Midoriya. You want me to call you Kacchan? Izuku asked incredulously. And I don't care, call me whatever. I call you Deku, so it's even this way. Okay, Kacchan, the brunette said slowly and laced with apparent confusion. He felt like he was missing some parts of the puzzle. TCH, that's all I wanted to say. Kacchan scowled, bowed his head to Izuku's mother who remained equally as confused as her son, murmured a quiet apology and turned on his heels. He marched off, his hands buried in his pockets. The blonde looked as if he was deep in thought as he rounded the corner. It occurred to Izuku that Kacchan actually didn't really say anything. Wait, did he say even? The remaining few months of his first year of middle school ended as unspectacular as they started. The only true highlight of the year was finally getting Kacchan's approval, or acknowledgement at the very least. Izuku would shamefully admit it took him longer than he'd like to realize that. The blonde was very implicit about the whole situation, which led the aspiring hero into believing that it was a rather difficult thing for Kacchan to do. Regardless, he was happy with the overall outcome. There wasn't the usual underlying tension whenever he was around Kacchan anymore. The teen was still crass, and he was still aggressive towards anyone he didn't deem worthy of his time. But at the very least, the two got along much better. Their friendship was miraculously salvaged. Izuku wasn't entirely sure who he should be grateful to for such a fortunate turn of events. He actually had a friend again. Not that the blonde would ever claim that's what they were. If anything, Bakugo continued to call him Deku. But it didn't carry the same bite it used to have. All things considered, it was much better than being called a B-rated extra in comparison. Another quickly rising occurrence was their constant hanging out. They frequented a diner nearby both their houses the most. The ambiance inside the restaurant was cozy and soothing. It helped when both were studying for tests. They became fast regulars, even being recognized by name. Moreover, they too spent plenty of time at each other's respective house. Izuku considered this another sign of acknowledgement, given how he never actually went into the blonde's home before. He was never given permission back in preschool. Okay class, pencils down, the teacher called from his desk. A collective sigh escaped across the classroom. Some faces were relieved, others confident and the rare few in dreading horror. Izuku had finished minutes before the call-out, and was working on a hero quirk analysis. Izuku was snapped from his trance, noticing the sudden increase in movement and sound. He surveyed his surroundings and safely assumed the allocated time was up. He turned on his chair and faced the thoroughly bored-looking Kacchan. He was resting his head on his palm while his other hand was absently spinning a mechanical pencil with practiced ease. "'Bout damn timing this shit ended," the blonde said once he noticed Izuku's gaze land on him. He nodded in agreement, to the sentiment if nothing else. He didn't have anything against tests, besides maybe being painfully easy. With finals out of the way, the teens had a break from classes. With the free spare time, the two would assist one another in their training, sparring, or essentially whatever the two felt like required improvement. If Izuku recalled, the two boys planned to increase stamina and work on precise quirk usage. Bakugo's quirk had potential for long-range application. However, he simply lacked the precision and accuracy. Izuku's quirk usage was far too one-dimensional, so the two sought out ways to increase its versatility. The two walked home, gathered their necessary gear and supplies, then met up at a location roughly between both houses. From there, they set a course straight to Mizuha's facility. Izuku introduced the facility to Kacchan less than 2 months ago. Once realizing just what exactly the facility could offer the blonde, he couldn't contain his maddening grin. Granted, the brunette misinterpreted it for unhinged rage, but that was a misunderstanding quickly corrected. Kacchan thoroughly enjoyed trashing targets with his quirk, and also had the decency to pay attention when one of the experts gave him suggestions. They were eventually permitted to use the facility as long as they wished, so long as they left when the final worker did. This granted them free access to experiment and improved their control over their quirks without any hindrances. The two teens would bounce ideas off of one another, and tended to use each other as live dummies for some of their more intricate special attacks. Their latest attempts have been fruitful, with Kacchan using his body and spinning momentum as a medium for a massive explosion. The howitzer impact took many battered bones and bloodied bruises before truly being practical in combat. The two teens were ecstatic, in their own respective manners when Kacchan finally pulled it off. "Alright Kacchan, try to hit him, I fucking got it, just stay still and die," the blonde shouted. Kacchan cupped his open palm in his other hand. His palm quickly heated up, turning an orange hue before erupting into a concentrated explosion. The smoke and force was narrowed, and ultimately traveled further than his normal wide expanding explosions. However, it still lacked the precision necessary to truly pose a threat. Izuku purposely placed himself at the farthest end of the room. It wouldn't truly be long range if they didn't maximize their space. In doing so, the fiery force from Kacchan's attack barely tickled as it reached him. They continued the routine several more times with relatively similar results. Eventually Kacchan begrudgingly waved his hand, which was their signal to call it quits. The greenette walked over, already going over things the blonde could improve on for their next session. "Alright Deku, spit it out," Kacchan hissed, his focus more on clutching one of his arms. Izuku nodded, pointedly ignoring the pain Kacchan was in. He didn't like it being addressed as it was only a drawback from overexertion. He probably wouldn't be able to do much with his quirk tomorrow. "I think narrowing surface area is the ideal course of action to maximize distance. It should also double as increased firepower given your explosions would be more compressed and concentrated as a result," Izuku half murmured half lectured. "Right," Katsuki said, coughing into his hand. Katsuki quickly realized over the months that Deku was very eager when it came to quirks and their applications. Katsuki had his suspicions before, but this was ridiculous. The greenette got overbearing at times. Edit. All the time. However, there was merit to almost everything he said. The blonde couldn't deny that Deku was his superior in terms to quirk application. That being said, it was entirely due to the fact that Katsuki simply didn't care enough for other quirks. He was a genius in his own right, which came out in full force whenever the two teens sparred, with supervision of course. Katsuki was a combative expert. He had an inherent natural talent for battle tactics and spur-of-the-moment decisions. Deku hasn't won a spar since their first in the play set all those months ago. "Well then, I'll go next," the greenette said as he stretched one of his arms. Katsuki nodded and took a few steps back. In that moment, the floor hissed and slowly parted before the pair. A campfire slowly raised from the ground. The sound of gears and propulsion sang in symphony until finally, the newly elevated fire and its base were perfectly aligned with the gym floor. "Thanks," Izuku shouted, throwing a thumbs up towards the viewing area. The facility in itself was high class, efficient and crafted with the intent and purpose of having people survey and examine what was transpiring inside the large gym room. As such, the whole left side was completely full of thick window panes, giving a perfect view for any and all examiners. A pair of people smiled and tossed a thumbs up of their own towards the greenette from the safety of the other room. "New move or just trying your weird sucking shit?" Kacchan asked. The second one. "Then we're done here," the blonde said, pausing to stretch his arms. "See you tomorrow, Deku," he finished, giving a half wave as he exited the room. Izuku ruefully smiled, but decided that he wanted to optimize his quirk more before tackling an ultimate move. For starters, Izuku wanted to see if he could consume flames if he only barely had his mouth open. To see how much his mouth played into the absorption process. He wanted to see if it was all a mnemonic device he created at a young age, or if now that he's older, he doesn't have to be gaping like a fish the whole time. He also wanted to delve deeper into the science behind the fuel to his fire breathing. If he could eat things like heat or light, then access to his quirk would become immensely more practical. Sensei Mizuha said it was possible with enough practice. So practice he would. The day was moving at a snail's pace. The novelty of being a second year quickly faded away after a few weeks. Then, things went back to how they were his first year in Aldera Junior High, a boring experience he was forced to go through. It wasn't that Izuku found education boring, far from it. The opposite in fact, he had a craving for knowledge and learning. It was due to his unquenching thirst that he exhausted everything teachers could teach him in class. He taught himself first. However, Izuku was raised to be respectful, and as such he did his best to pay attention to the classes before him. He even took notes, which he thought was tedious and counterintuitive since he already had notes on the subject matter at home. It was a grueling experience. However, something Izuku couldn't or simply wouldn't do, that the school kid were school trips. That was something he could get eager for. Alright, pick your roommates, 4 people to a room, nothing more. It's a 2-night trip, so you better pack accordingly, the teacher explained. The class quickly erupted into discussion, with students jumping from screeching chairs and hastily forming groups. Well, all but one. This teen in question simply propped his legs onto his desk and leaned back into his chair in a bored manner. TCH, fucking waste of time, Katsuki sneered from his desk. It happened to be behind Izuku's in this instance, which prompted the boy to turn and face him. A sheepish smile on his face. So, we're still grouping up, right? The blonde rolled his eyes. Obviously, go get us some extras. Me? Yes you. You're a fucking mess in these kinds of situations. I don't think I want to hear that from you, Kachin, the greenette thought, rubbing his head before getting up from his seat. Izuku rising prompted the whole class into silence, and all pair of eyes landed on him. He fidgeted in place. Sweat slowly started to run down his face as he remained glued to the spot. He was jolted upright as he felt the sole of a shoe imprint itself onto his back. He yelped and turned to glare at the blonde. His friend returned said glare tenfold. He wasn't going to beat that. Instead he hastily faced forward and felt compelled to get his message across. We need 2 more people for our group, does anyone want to? I'll do it, pick me. Don't listen to them, I'll join you guys. You obviously need me for your group. You mean Bakugo? No way, dudes. Who the fuck said that? The blonde erupted, climbing on top of his desk with practiced finesse. Settle down class. Bakugo, don't use your quirk inside. Also please get off your desk, the teacher droned. The teen grumbled before sulking in his chair. Izuku laughed nervously as the outburst seemingly did nothing to deter a third of his class from swarming his desk. To think the 2 of them were still so unjustifiably popular made the greenette feel uncomfortable. He was starting to wonder if he should be eager for the trip, or dread it. Ring ring ree. Izuku slammed his hand against the clock, silencing it. Also, possibly breaking it. He definitely didn't intend to hit it as hard as he did. Izuku blearily blinked the sleep from his eyes and gazed towards his window. It was still dark out, giving his whole room a shadowy overcast. He nimbly slipped from his all-might blanket and made his way to his bathroom. He stifled a yawn as he ran the water. Why was he waking up so early again? He contemplated the question as he brushed his teeth. It was during his shower when his memory came to him. His school trip started today. He even recalled neatly folding his clothing and placing it in his all-might duffel bag. With his invigorating shower done with, he hastily got change. He scanned his phone and darkened considerably when he had 3 missed calls. He regrettably took long showers. His hair was pretty difficult to maintain hygienically after all. He quickly redialed and was instantly greeted with heated shouts. Deku, what the fuck is taking you so long? Kachin hissed from his end. Long shower, hee. My bad? Just let me in, it's fucking freezing, the blonde replied before abruptly hanging up. Izuku sighed, then made his way to and opened the front door. Katsuki was there waiting with his own duffel bag. Currently, the blonde was watching his own breath frost with a bored expression. Once he noticed the door opening, he turned and welcomed himself in. "'Bout goddamn timing, did you fall in or something? I just woke up, I was a bit distracted," Izuku explained as the 2 made their way to the kitchen. On the island countertop were 2 covered plates. His mother left early for work, but would almost always make time to cook him breakfast. It was sweet and Izuku truly had no idea how he was going to repay his mom for all she did. "Whatever, your mom made you 2 meals, or she just forget to eat?" Kachin asked, addressing the second plate. "Nope, she made that one for you," Izuku explained, pushing the plate forward. The blonde's eyes widened slightly before narrowing back into their usual scowl. He took a peek at the contents of the plate. "Wait, do these eggs have jalapenos in them?" the boy asked incredulously. Told her you liked spicy stuff. I didn't think she'd make you your own eggs though," the greenette explained, revealing his own plate of eggs. Sure enough, the scrambled eggs lacked the diced pepper. Bakugo raised a curious eyebrow. Just how compromising and nice were the Midoriyas exactly? He didn't ponder it much himself, quickly shoveling the food into his mouth. The 2 finished up their meals, cleaned their respective dishes and headed out towards the school. Their walk was done in the dark, as the sun yet to surface. This was due to their early start time. The trip was in the Chiba prefecture, and the train ride would take 2 to 3 hours from Musutafu. In order to fit everything into the schedule, the school decided to send their students early in the morning. The two teens rounded the corner and saw several other zombie-like students waiting at the front. 3 yellow buses were lined up against the road, one for class by the look of things. Izuku and Kacchan were quickly waved over by some of their classmates. The greenette obliged easily enough, dragging his less than interested friend along with him. They waited for several more minutes, exchanging small talk until finally the teachers deemed the trip ready to go. The bus ride to the train station was done in typical chaos. Chatter all but consumed the bus, even with the supervisor's constant reminder to remain civil. It was the first major trip for most of the students though, so the teacher knew a lost cause when he saw one. Izuku too wouldn't deny he was thoroughly excited for the trip. However, sitting beside Kacchan tempered his soul and more or less made him good at concealing his emotions. Lest his friend take out his frustration on him. The tickets were bought preemptively, when they were paid for earlier in the year. Izuku was impressed with the meticulous effort put into designing the trip. He chalked it up to years of experience, as Aldera Junior High always did this trip for its second years. Izuku was glad he was talked into going on the trip. Mizuha and his mom encouraged him to go. However, it was when Kacchan rolled up demanding them to pair up when he decided he'd go along. The blonde seeking him out was too good an opportunity to pass up. On the other hand, Katsuki would never have considered going, as he didn't have any friends to make the trip worthwhile. However, there was still Deku. That was the closest thing to a friend and he made for decent company. If the teen ended up going, that'd mean Katsuki would have been left to fester in his boredom for days. He'd easily manage it, but if he just hanged out with Deku instead, then the problem would have been solved altogether. Thus, the two ended up deciding to go on the basis of an absence of information. The pair of teens picked seats near the back of the class's cart. The bullet train was long and slick. It used some ant-magnetic propulsions that shaved off considerable amount of time, making it one of the fastest forms of transportation in Japan. Izuku took a window seat and stared in awe as the scenery blurred into a collage of colors. He heard his friend click his tongue in frustration, and turned to see the blonde slip on some headphones. He rested his head against the cushioned seat and shut his eyes, presumably trying to catch some sleep. Izuku shrugged, looking back towards the scenery. The train ride was relatively boring beyond that. The first time the train went through a tunnel was sort of intriguing, if only due to the novelty of the event if nothing more. But even that too became a bit dull. A few of the students in his vicinity tried talking to him, until they noticed Katsuki sleeping to his side. Yet again, his blonde friend denied him the ability to make others. "Everyone, the train's about to reach the station. Please be ready to leave when that occurs," one of the supervisors said from the front, their voice projecting through the narrow cart. Izuku nudged his sleeping friend awake, against half-hearted protests. The blonde rubbed the sleep from his eyes as he pocketed his headphones. "The fuck?" he asked, stretching away the soreness. "We're here," Izuku responded simply. Katsuki clicked his tongue but refrained from saying more. After a few minutes of loitering, the class was finally able to exit the train. They collected their bags then proceeded to be escorted towards the inn they'd be staying at. Izuku was admittedly rather giddy by the prospect. He never truly experienced many vacations before, especially since he was more focused on his hero training more than anything. A lot of the money his mom made went to that actually. Something he was grateful for. To think she was also giving him the privilege to go on a trip like this? He was truly blessed. The greenette burst into waterworks just thinking about it, much to Bakugo's chagrin. "You idiot, quit making a mess," he hissed, skipping back in time to avoid the unrequested shower. Sorry, I'm just so glad to be here. Can't imagine why. All we've done is walk around this shitty city." "I suppose, but it's still a refreshing change of pace," Izuku reasoned. "TCH, whatever." That was as good a confirmation as any when it came to his friend. The class eventually came to the inn they'd reside in for the 2 nights. It was a large traditional inn. It had nice wooden floors and a calming aura. Its garden was intricate and well maintained. But most importantly it was run by a hero. The relaxing hero, Tranquil. Her quirk allowed her to forcefully calm people around her, making her ideal for hostage and intensely high-pressure situations. The applications of her quirk were perhaps one-dimensional, but that didn't stop her from using it effectively. She essentially made people sluggish and receptively slower than usual, thus making her a strong combatant in one-on-one situations. She started her line of work a few years ago, and was a rather pop. "Deku, quit your mumbling shit," Bakugo reprimanded, elbowing the boy. He yelped, and snapped from his trance. He ducked his head as the rest of his class and teachers stared at him. Right, as Midoriya said, this inn is indeed run by Tranquil. Be on your best behavior, or she may just make you, the teacher warned. The class voiced their acknowledgement and were soon escorted into their rooms. It was plain and simple, with plenty of space, a small table and a window outlooking the garden. They had mattresses neatly folded to the side, and a door that led to a washroom. All in all, Izuku was ecstatic, his hands subconsciously going before his mouth in suppressed awe. His fellow roommates shared a tame yet similar sentiment. "This place is real chill," one of them said. Rockhead? No wait, that was the nickname Kachin gave him. He really should learn the names of his classmates. Cool, the other said. Snailies. Yeah, Izuku really needed to learn their names, lest he ends up becoming like his friend. Listen here extras, don't cause a damn ruckus, don't make a mess, and most importantly stay out of our way, the blonde explained, jabbing a thumb towards Izuku. The greenet's jaw dropped, his eyes spinning at the needless hostility. The two nodded their heads vigorously, seemingly okay with a scolding so long it came from Katsuki. This only prompted for Izuku to flush in embarrassment. He's treating them like his thugs. He thought, you two done with your shit? Good, then let's go. Bakugo ordered, marching towards the door before even hearing a response. The two followed suit, and eventually Izuku resigned to doing the same. The group met up with several other students at the lobby. Before everyone was sent to their rooms, the teachers established the lobby as their meetup location. After everyone had their things placed in their rooms, the classes would then go towards the National Museum of Japanese History. The intent and purpose behind the trip after all was for Japanese history class. Eventually, everyone gathered, and were neatly divided into their respective classes before being loaded up on a bus. A bus guide gave them a tourist introduction to all the sights, much to Izuku's wonderment. After reaching the museum, the classes were neatly escorted inside the building. It was massive, and carried bountiful amount of culture in its exhibits and pieces. Izuku, having a craving for knowledge, found himself immediately immersed in the setting. He spent a lot of time in the library near his home, and history was one of the many topics unable to escape his clutches. He felt an elbow in his ribs, which at this point he was starting to realize was Kachin's way of grabbing his attention. He rubbed his side as he faced his friend. Katsuki looked wholly uninterested, his hands in his pockets and posture slouched over. However, his face was focused on something across from him. Tracing his gaze, Izuku's eyes fell on what appeared to be some students. Their uniforms were different, so perhaps another school. Izuku didn't really know what exactly was so interesting about them, but Kachin's menacing grin certainly raised alarm bells. He couldn't ask much about the other school as their group was quickly escorted outside for lunch. The sun shone brightly, and the city bustle clashed with the tranquility the building evoked. The class sat around each other, in their groups as they ate a small lunch provided to them. Izuku noticed it was a bit dry, but he honestly couldn't complain. Everything was really thought out for the trip. He ran through the schedule again. They'd spend some more time in the museum, before getting an hour of free time, then they'd go back to the inn for the night. Everything about it was precisely planned. Deku, let's go, Katsuki said, rising from his spot on the ground. The teen paused, rice balls suspended before an open mouth. He blinked once at the blonde in confusion. Katsuki sighed in annoyance. He pointed his pinky and thumb in opposite directions and teetered his closed fist in front of his mouth. Let's go, Izuku choked out. Finish your food, Bakugo droned out. Where you two going? Rockhead asked in between chewing. What did I fucking do? Getting drinks, want any? Izuku interrupted quickly. Juice. Iced tea, the two said in unison. Alright, I'll get them for you, he replied nervously, shoving the fuming blonde away. They rounded the corner quick enough and walked down the road. Izuku recalled a small store nearby. It should have refrigerated drinks, that'd do wonders for the lunch they've been eating, plus the day was gradually getting hotter by the second. He also was hoping the drink might cool off his now heated friend. "Don't stop me from setting those idiots straight," the blonde eventually said, his face in a scowl. "You can set them straight if you want, but you shouldn't be rude about it," he responded delicately. "Are you fucking shitting me?" No, TCH, you're a goddamn idiot too." Right, he waved off. Over the year, it became painfully clear that fixing Kachin's mannerisms would be a difficult task. However, given how he aspires to become a hero too, it would be prudent to make him more appealing to the masses. A swearing hothead was a bit of a niche hero archetype. In all of his constant attempts to help tame his friend's abrasive nature, he became fully accustomed to receiving crude remarks. He was numb to them actually. It certainly helped with socializing with the blonde at least. The two walked into the store they spotted on their way to the museum. The two carefully walked around a group of seated students before entering the store. A bell chimed, signaling their arrival. The building was modest in size, but packed with plenty of products. The beverages were in the back, chilled and neatly lined up against the wall. "Those the same extras from that boring-ass place," Katsuki said, jabbing his finger behind him. "Yeah, another school's at the same museum. Why are you interested in that anyways?" Izuku asked. "I'm not interested, I just noticed some of them starting shit." "What kind of shit?" Izuku forced out, shuddering at the craze use. Bakugo paused, his gaze fixated at the kids outside before a wicked grin spread across his face. He hastily shoved his can of iced coffee into Izuku's chest before strutting out. The greenette juggled the can in a desperate attempt to not drop it. After stabilizing, he turned to face his friend, only to pale considerably. Katsuki was stalking towards the group of students much like a predator would prey. Izuku was also familiar with how both of those scenarios usually pan out to know that things were progressing in the worst possible way. He hastily placed the drinks down before dashing out the store. He stopped a few paces behind Katsuki, and watched in silence as his friend stared down a trio of teens. They had the same uniform he saw in the museum, so they were likely the same group the blonde was interested in. "You extras think it's cool to deface shit just 'cause you're bored?" Katsuki asked, a smug knowing grin on his face. Who are you? Don't accuse us for things you'd likely do." A boy with glasses said, looked startled by the accusation. "What was that?" The blonde responded, his tone going icy. "Yeah, you're clearly a delinquent," another voiced, gaining confidence from his friend. "I should kill you fuckers so you learn your lesson," he said, small firecrackers popping menacingly on his hand. Wait. Kachin, we can't start fights without a reason. This your friend? Put him on a leash, he's unhinged." Izuku froze, and turned to face the group of students, his own face falling into a state of stoicism. "Look, he may be needlessly hostile and crass. Deku, shut the fuck up. But he doesn't make baseless accusations. If he said you defaced something, you did." Glasses' face audibly gulped, and paled considerably. If he was expecting Izuku to belittle his friend's intuition, he was sorely mistaken. Izuku trusted Katsuki's gut feeling closely. The blonde was rarely wrong about things as it stood. Picking fights with strangers is unmanly. Another voice shouted, promptly drawing both parties' attention. A black-haired teen with a scar over his right eye marched over with excessive bravado. He took embellished long strides and had a hardened gaze. He was rather plain with the hairstyle he was sporting. He did however have notably shark-like teeth. "You're not one of them, get lost," Katsuki said, his gaze only temporarily landing on the new arrival before going back to the trio. "No way, you're trying to pick a fight with some of my classmates." The teen responded hotly. No, we aren't doing that," Izuku hastily corrected, throwing his hands out in surrender. The crowd of students, from a different school no less, were starting to eat away at his ability to remain calm. Especially since they were murmuring and staring at the alien students that Katsuki and him presented. "If you're looking for a fight, then I'll give you one." Izuku screamed internally. "You stupid or something? I said get lost," Katsuki shouted, his frustration boiling over. "And I said I'm not going to let you bully my classmates." "Hey yo," another voice joined. Izuku went ramrod straight. If another person joined in this seemingly endless embarrassment, Izuku was certain he'd run in shame. It didn't help matters at all that the person to join this time was a girl. His experience with girls only extended to mothers and elders. Conclusion: he hadn't really spoken to too many girls. Hey, it's Ishido, some student whispered loud enough for Izuku to hear. He turned and was caught off guard by the sight before him. The new arrival was pink. Literally, her skin and hair were a light shade of pink. However, her most prominent features would be her black and golden eyes and horns protruding out from her hair. She had a large toothy grin on her face, and clearly was not bothered by the rising tension at all. It made Izuku feel oddly relieved. You aren't one of them either, kindly fuck off. Nope, hell yeah, you fighting with me? Sweet, that makes it a solid 2v2, take on the green-haired guy, I go. Nope, what? The teen spluttered, turning to face the pink-haired girl in confusion. We aren't trying to start a fight, I'm glad you see that. Izuku started, only to lose steam once he realized he lacked her name. Ishido Mina, nice to meetcha. What's your names? None of your fuck. This is my friend Bakugo Katsuki, I'm Midoriya Izuku, the greenette introduced hastily. He purposely ignored the glare sent his way and instead focused on the toothy smile before him. That's cool. I think I saw your uniform, you guys from the museum? She asked expertly. Why yes, we're from Aldera Junior High, second years. Aldera? That doesn't sound too familiar. Oh. We're second years too. The girl beamed, clapping her hands together. She then paused as if pondering something before turning to face the raven-haired teen to her side. Actually, what's your name? I don't think I know it. Izuku blinked at that snippet of news. She jumped in not knowing any parties present? Especially with how intimidating Kacchan can appear. That was impressive. Kirishima Eijiro, the shark-toothed boy choked out, clearly having his sails blown from under him. I see. Hey, is your school trip from out of town? Aldera just doesn't ring a bell, she concluded. Yeah, we're from Musutafu, Izuku supplied, much to the blonde's growing annoyance. No way. The same city that has Ua High. That's the coolest school in all of Japan. 3 pair of eyes underwent separate reactions to her proclamation. Bakugo's narrowed, Ayaku's watered and Kirishima's widened. The 3 all held different amounts of curiosity, and were interested about the topic. It was their aspirations to be accepted into that school after all. You plan on going to Ua too? Izuku blurted. Definitely. I want to help save as many people as I can. Ishido explained easily enough. So manly. Kirishima mumbled under his breath, seeing his fellow classmate in a different light. That's amazing, Kacchan and I are aiming for Ua too. Katsuki growled at the nickname, especially given how it was used in a public setting. Regardless, his eyes landed on the girl before him. Her smile was infuriating, but given how she drew too much attention, it would be impossible to kill the fuckers. Speaking of, the slimy bastards took the constant distractions as their means of escape. They weren't in sight. The blonde clicked his tongue in annoyance. I'm done here, Deku, get the drinks when you're done with the extras, he finally said, shoving people aside as he left. How rude. The pinkhead huffed, he's really planning on becoming a hero? No, he'll definitely become one. If you don't mind me asking, but what's your quirk? Acid. I can melt things with a liquid I make. I can change its viscosity and solubility too, she answered, seemingly over the blonde's blunt dismissal. Wow, that's amazing. You could easily enough use that in an effective manner. Actually, the utility that kind of quirk possesses would be essential when it comes to mobility. Wow, you're like a quirk nerd. Izuku felt as if someone plunged a knife into his chest, but couldn't really refute her claim. His head fell in a defeated manner before he felt someone heavily tap his shoulder. He looked up and came face to face with razor-sharp teeth. He would have been startled had they not been in a large grin. You're alright? I thought you'd try to start a fight like your friend back there, Kirishima said. And no, we weren't well, I don't think we were trying to start a fight. Some of your classmates were disrespectful towards the museum exhibits is all. What? No way. You telling me your friend was setting them straight? Damn, he's manly too, the shark-toothed teen said, his eyes watering as he shaked a closed fist. Aren't you being swayed too easily here? Izuku thought. So what's your quirk? Ishido asked, steering the conversation back on topic. It's called pyrokinetic breath. I can eat fire and use it as fuel to produce flames from my mouth. Oh wow, that sounds super cool. Why yeah, flashy too. Kirishima murmured, his smile fading. Izuku noticed the change, it was quite blatant in all actuality. Izuku had only ever seen the boy in his complete earnestness, the change in his demeanor was all the more jarring. Ishido noticed it too, sending a worried gaze towards her peer. "Kiri, something on your mind?" No, nah. My quirk's hardening." The boy proceeded to give a demonstration, making his skin appear slightly rough and rock-like. "It's not very appealing, makes me wonder if I'd manage to compete with either of you, ya know? You want to be a hero too?" Ishido asked. "Yeah, but I got a long way to go." The teen shrugged, suddenly feeling rather uncomfortable with sharing his apprehensions. "Perhaps not as much as you think." Izuku froze when both students turned to face him. "Sorry, your quirk may not be flashy, but it's very practical. If you improved it, I'm certain you'd become truly popular." "Sorry, I bet you didn't want to hear that coming from some Stran." No, it's cool. Thanks, you're right, I just got to give it my all." That was some manly advice there, Midoriya. "Why, you're welcome? Hey, if we're all striving to be heroes, then we should totally exchange line accounts." Ishido piped up, hopping on a foot in exuberant excitement. Exchange accounts? That's so sudden. He only had a dozen contacts or so, and even less that he actually used. The only other girl in his contacts was his mother. Izuku found his face flushing at the implications alone, but robotically went through the motions of taking out his phone. "Midori's all for the idea, what about you, Kiri? Bonding under a common goal, that's basically the pinnacle of manliness. Hell yeah, you know I'm all about it." The boy fist pumped. The three exchanged numbers with the promise of keeping in touch. They all agreed that they'd see one another in UA. Izuku wasn't particularly cynical, but he wasn't ignorant to the incredible difficulty that the entrance exams possessed. Perhaps that was why Kachin left so early. Attachments and all that. Regardless, they wished to become a hero, so whether it was UA or otherwise, Izuku was certain he'd see them in the line of duty eventually. Izuku used up the majority of his lunchtime and waved off the two teens. They reciprocated with a wave of their own. He rounded the corner and was headed back to the museum when he finally recalled something fundamentally crucial. He forgot the drinks. Besides the immediate scolding he received from Katsuki, the remainder of the trip was rather enjoyable. As it turns out, both Ishido and Kirishima were students on a similar trip. Theirs was a single day, and far more accessible since they lived nearby. Katsuki wasn't particularly excited to hear Izuku actually exchanged numbers with what he coined as extras. Emo hair and raccoon eyes weren't flattering nicknames either. Izuku simply refrained from talking about his fellow aspiring heroes after that night. The trip itself wasn't nearly as fulfilling or exciting since the first day. On the second, the class was able to switch into casual clothing or hiking clothing. They went on buses towards nearby trails and traversed it for a few hours. Thanks to Izuku's conditioning, he found the hike to be relatively easy. The same sentiment wasn't shared with the majority of the class. Katsuki was actually quite at peace, calm even during the whole hike. He even looked serene. It was a new side to him that Izuku didn't even know he was capable of. He wouldn't tell him that though, that would just needlessly piss his friend off. He wasn't going to look the gift horse in the mouth, and instead decided to absorb the scenery around him. Apparently, the purpose of the hike was to enrich oneself. But most importantly, there was a temple deep in the forest, one that the teacher thought would be nice to talk about. The teacher made sure that everyone was paying attention by hinting some of the content would be present on a quiz. Izuku didn't require an incentive to learn about things. In fact, he personally enjoyed it more than all of the walking. In their free time, Izuku and Katsuki went for a run. Then, they proceeded to spar. Sparring became quite a common training procedure for the both of them, although it initially was one that Izuku strictly avoided. Izuku was only recently convinced to spar with his friend after the benefits were explained to him in a concise manner. Katsuki never thought he'd have to put so much thought into why he should beat up someone. Regardless, the outcome ended up being the same. After said spar, the boys in their class were given permission to use the open-air spa in the inn. It was surprisingly uneventful. They did relax their muscles, and found the heat soothing for an otherwise tedious workout. On the third day, Izuku messaged his two new acquaintances and told them he was leaving. Both were busy, but reiterated their goals, sent him farewells and promised to see him again. He felt happy to have met the two aspiring heroes. Ones who seemed genuine in their ambition at the very least. Ishido was a nice girl, and one who clearly liked to help others. Izuku wasn't naive to what she did, she diffused the problem. She actually managed to prevent Kacchan from causing a bigger scene. Kirishima had a sense of insecurity, yet still strove to become a hero. He too attempted to prevent Kacchan from causing a scene. He was hot-blooded and passionate as well. His quirk may not have been flashy and was considered at a disadvantage by Kirishima himself. But that was simply testimony to his perseverance. Izuku hoped he'd see them in Ua. It motivated him even more to improve. Once he returned back from the trip, the first thing he wanted to do was immediately go to Mizuha's facility and work on his quirk control. Naturally, his mother pinned him down and forced him to tell her everything about the trip first. Izuku was happy to indulge her. His motivation was never lacking, but that wasn't to say it couldn't be bolstered more so. With even more support behind him, Izuku fully intended to increase his training regime. He would never know what kind of ripples his seemingly inconsequential school trip would have.
That's all for now. If you enjoy this video, then please like, share and do comments.